Hello there. Um, this is the recorded lecture on marketing for Introduction to Business. Hi, guys. Hope you're doing well. So, first question I suppose we should ask is what is marketing? And I put it this way. I normally don't put a question mark, a question as my title, but I have had students who graduate and then they go in an interview and somebody says, "Oh, you majored in marketing. What is marketing?" And they go, "Well, and the trouble is there's many definitions for marketing. So let's just briefly discuss this issue. Um, this is this definition: marketing is a social and managerial process by which individuals and groups obtain what they need and want through creating and exchanging value with others. This is from Philip Kotler, who is sort of a guru of marketing educators. And I can't really argue with this definition. It's absolutely true, but it seems a little academic. I'm a more practical type of person, so I came up with my own definition. Marketing is the creation, communication, and delivery of value resulting in transactions. So we have to create something of value, tell people about it, communicate it, deliver it, um, and then hopefully we get paid for it. We exchange, for money usually. And this actually coincides with something called the marketing mix, which I'll be talking about in a moment. What's important to understand is that marketing is more than sales and advertising. Usually, when people think of marketing, they think of a salesperson or they think of advertising they see on the online or in television, that sort of thing. Of course, superior marketing or good marketing is the creation, communication, delivery of superior value, resulting in repeated transactions and ultimately relationships because developing relationships with customers is a huge advantage in marketing. So, um, again, it's more than sales and advertising. There's distribution, there's product development, pricing. These are all extraordinarily important in marketing. And again, I won't ask you to ever regurgitate, a definition, but it's important that you understand that it's a wide range of activities, not just the most stereotypical ones that the public will think about. I mentioned in my definition of transaction, it's important to actually understand what a transaction is. Obviously, people understand it's an exchange, usually product or services for money. But it's important to understand that a transaction will only occur when each party, each side, feels they're receiving more than they're giving. So they value what they're getting more than what they're giving up. And I'll give an example. Years ago, excuse me, I was a young man and I had to go to a wedding and I didn't really have anything appropriate to wear, so I went to the store. And I saw a jacket that I thought I really liked it. I fell in love with it. I don't know. I'm not a big fashion guy, but I really liked that jacket. But the trouble is, it had a price tag of $300. And I was young and not particularly wealthy. And yes, I had $300. I could have purchased this jacket for $300. And I really liked it. And I kind of, uh, you know, was conflicted about it. But I ultimately decided I valued my $300 more than I valued the jacket. Um, because we all have only so much money, and we have to figure out what we want to pay for it. Now, some people would have said, "Yeah, I'll pay $300 for that jacket. It's a great jacket," and they're very maybe very they value fashion more than they necessarily value other things. Now, imagine for a moment if you were the salesperson in that situation, and you approach me and you say, "Oh, you like this jacket? Would you like to try it on?" Blah blah blah. You want so well how understanding that I, as a consumer, don't necessarily want to pay $300. What could you do? That I valued my $300 more than I valued the jacket. Well, there's a number of approaches a salesperson could take in that situation. One would be, and the most obvious thing is, drop the price. And sometimes salespeople do have the authority to drop price. They don't really want to, but they could. Certainly, if it was, if that person has the authority, they might do that. And you've heard the term haggling or negotiating. Um, these happens. Now, that's probably the least desirable way to make that sale happen, because that means the revenue will be reduced, profits. From the perspective of the salesperson in the store, that's not really what you want to do. Although sometimes that's what you have to do. Certainly you have clearance sales and things like that. Another way a salesperson could approach it is not to reduce what they're receiving, but to increase the value of the product that's being sold. What could they do? I mean, this is where good salesmanship comes into play. They could, explain the value. Oh, well, this jacket is very durable. It's the finest fabrics. Essentially, what you do is you raise the value of the product in the mind of the consumer. That's where the value always exists. It's in the mind of the consumer or the customer. If they can do that, that's fantastic. Another way they can raise value is maybe providing more adding on. Well, if you buy this jacket, I'll throw in a tie. Of course, that means that you can't sell that tie to another customer. So you figure out what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. But it's important that each side figures out what they value. For instance, I could have said, well, I like this jacket, but I'm not going to pay $300. I'll offer you $150. And that person, then the person on the side of the store, whether it's a salesperson or the manager, has to figure, well, do I value that $150 more than I value the jacket? Chances are they wouldn't, because they value the jacket not because they love the jacket, but because they think they can sell it for $300. So it's important to understand the dynamics of a transaction. Both sides need to feel they're receiving more than they're giving up. Every product or every brand has a brand value, product value. Again, the value exists in the mind of the consumer. But of course, marketers are trying to form that opinion. And we do that primarily with something called the marketing mix, also referred to as the 4 Ps. And these are the tactical tools marketers have, things that we can control. Think of them as the levers. It's product, you control your product. What product are you going to offer? What price are you going to set? How are you going to distribute it? We use the word place mainly because it begins with the letter P, so we can say the 4 Ps. Place as in location. And then promote. How are we going to promote? How are we going to communicate the brand value of this product? And these are the primary decisions that marketers will have to make on a daily or weekly basis. And if you notice, this actually correlates to the definition I gave you earlier about what is marketing. Beyond that, we actually have environmental forces. Now, these are things we have no control over. Think of it like if you're a sailor in a sailboat, and then the wind. You have no control over the wind, but you still have to deal with it. Now, you can take advantage of it. If the winds are blowing in your favor, great. If they're not, if they're working against you, you have to figure out how to sail through against the wind. And yes, some examples as you see here, things like technology, nature. We've seen, like in the pandemic, that has affected the sale of products and services, both positively and negatively. For instance, for restaurants, the pandemic has been, or in gyms and places like that, the pandemic has been a definite negative environmental factor. But for companies like Zoom, it's actually been a very positive change in the environment. So while in general the pandemic is negative for most people, for certain products and services, it is an advantage. Obviously, we have the global environment. We have competition. We have different cultures across the world. There are political and legal forces, laws about what you can do and what you can't do. Social forces, cultural forces. What do people like? What do people dislike? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as the economy. Of course, the economy can have both a positive, negative effect on the marketing of products and services. We also have, and this is somewhat slightly historical, but various business orientations that companies can take. Um, the first one is called the production orientation. And essentially, the production orientation focuses on making products available and affordable. A perfect example of this would be Henry Ford's Model T automobile. The Model T was the first automobile produced through the assembly line production concept, where instead of a couple people building the entire automobile themselves, which is the way it had been done initially, you put it on an assembly line, and one person puts on the tires, one person puts in the seats, one person puts in the engine. I mean, or maybe a team. But the point is, it's a specialization, and that was a major step forward in terms of production, which made it more efficient, which made it more profitable. And so Henry Ford focused on two factors. One was availability. He developed a strong network of dealerships. And he also, and this goes to his price choice, he made it affordable. At that time, when most people were either walking or using horses, the automobile, for many, was considered a luxury item. Not many people had it. And we can see that it would be a luxury item. What he decided is he supposedly is quoted as saying he wanted even his own factory workers to be able to afford a Model T. I'm not sure what that says about what he was paying his factory workers or how he was pricing, but he wanted a more mass marketed type of product. Of course, and another Henry Ford quote: "You can have it in any color you want, as long as that color is black." There were no variations. There were no options. It was a one size fits all product. And given the fact that it was a relatively new product, he could get away with that. I'm not sure you could get away with that so easily today. You would have to have a product that has such advantage that just the core value would be enough to sell the product. Now I think we have too much competition for that, which kind of leads us into the product orientation, which focuses on product improvement. There was an old saying, "Build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door." The idea is if you come up with a superior product, people will find it. People will seek out superior products. And there is something to that. But I think definitely are examples where superior products fail because of, inferior marketing, other aspects of the marketing mix. For instance, Betamax tape, which was a competitor to VHS tape. Betamax was technically superior, except VHS, in the last century was adopted as a sort of a broad standard by consumers. They were offered VHS tapes and Betamax tape, players and systems, and they chose VHS even though it was a slightly inferior to Betamax system. And so these things happen. While this is, of course, because of competition, a better orientation than the simple production orientation, it wasn't perfect. So that led to the selling or sales orientation, which focused on promotion. The idea is you could have a good product, and that is preferable, but even if you had a bad product, you might be able to succeed through promotion, sales, personal sales, advertising, that sort of thing. And in fact, in some companies, they adopted both. The research and development and manufacturing arms focused on product orientation, and there was a marketing arm that focused on sales. Um, but none of these orientations are perfect. Um, and one of the reasons is that each of these begins with the same thing. They start at the same point, and it is always, here is my product. Do you want to buy it? That was essentially, here's my product. Do you want to buy it? We're not so interested in these orientations. We're more interested in the marketing orientation, which doesn't start with the product. It starts with the consumer, where we let needs drive the market. We ask, essentially, in a simplistic way, we ask the consumer, what do you want? We'll make it. And that is very true. We do market research. We ask questions. We get feedback on the products we have and how can we improve the product. So needs, drive the market as opposed to production. For instance, I had a client come to me, a new potential client come to me, and he had developed a new type of screwdriver. And it was very clever. He had a patent on it and everything. He worked out where he was going to get it manufactured. The way the screwdriver worked, let's say that this is the screwdriver. If you turn it to the right, it turned to the right. But if you turn it to the left, it would continue to turn to the right. If some of you may be familiar with a ratchet, but this is like a ratchet, a double ratchet. So you turn it to the right. If you turn it to the left, it continues to turn to the right. It was kind of a really fascinating thing. Which made it much more productive as a screwdriver, twice as productive, really. And he came to me and asked, if I could help him market it. And this is one of the few times I actually turned down a client, primarily because I felt, while this was a very clever thing he had created, it was sort of a solution for a product that didn't exist. I think most people either just get regular, 99-cent screwdrivers and use them, or if you are a more sophisticated craftsman or a professional, you get an electric screwdriver, a drill gun or something, that sort of thing. And this was sort of in between, and I didn't know there would be that much of a market for it. And plus, he was planning on liquidating his wife's 401k to finance it, and I just felt ethically I couldn't do that. I didn't want to be a part of ruining somebody. Brilliant thing, and I suggested that he take the mechanism and the patent and try to apply it to something else that might be more profitable. Because essentially he created a very clever solution but there's just no problem there. Nobody was complaining that screwdrivers weren't productive enough, or if they were, they got an electric device to do it for them. So and a lot of what we're doing in this lecture is establishing definitions. So forgive me if this goes on a little too much with defining words. One word that's important for us to define is the word market. When you ask most people what a market is, they think of a supermarket. That's not what we're talking about when we say a market. A market is a group of actual or potential buyers for our product. And you'll hear people say, well, is there a market for this product? Or how big is the market? What they mean is the number of buyers. And we also derive other terms from this, market segmentation, market orientation, market segments, market segmentation. So when we say market, we mean actual or potential buyers. So now, if you're thinking of like a supermarket or a store, that would maybe be called a marketplace or a distribution channel. So the use of the word market in marketing is a little different than it is for every people on the street in the vernacular. Another two words that should be defined: customer and consumer. Customer is a person who buys. A consumer is the person who consumes, who uses the product. So, for instance, a parent goes to the store and buys baby food, then brings it home and gives the baby food to their baby. The baby is the consumer, the parent is the customer. In the same way, also, let's look at the baby food manufacturer. Their customer is not the baby or the parent. Their customer is the store that buys it from them to sell it to the parent. So, Gerber's customer is, might be ShopRite, and ShopRite's customer might be the parent. And then but the parent is not the consumer unless they actually eat it themselves. So, ShopRite is not the consumer, they're the customer. A customer and a consumer can be the same person, however. They're just doing two, the customer is about buying, consumer is about consuming or using. And so sometimes it's important to distinguish these. We have consumer markets, and we are all consumers. And we buy an ice cream cone and consume it, or we buy a pen and use it. We are part of that consumer market. But we also have business to business markets. Where we are selling to businesses who are using it as part of their firm's activities. Let's say I'm a manufacturer of laptop computers. I may sell ultimately to consumers who will take it home and use it, or I may sell to businesses, who will use it for the conducting of their business. And so, and admittedly, sometimes there's a little blur between the two. I mean, I have a laptop here, and I use it for personal business, but I also use it for business. So, but like the selling of manufacturing equipment would be a business to business market type of thing. So important to understand that. And businesses do various things. They actually consume products for their own purposes. For instance, you look at the college. What does the college consume? It consumes paper. It consumes, office supplies, that sort of thing. Light bulbs, toilet paper, or stuff that's used for the conducting of business. Particularly for students to come in and use, or office workers or teachers, that sort of thing. There are sometimes business to business markets. Firms will purchase items for resale. So, for instance, a restaurant purchases food to sell to consumers, or a store like Macy's or Amazon or something. They buy products to sell to consumers. And Macy's would also buy things for business consumption. They have computers and copiers and light bulbs and that stuff that they don't resell. So each organization will have a different proportion of what they do. For instance, the college resells textbooks. But at a different proportion, between business consumption and resale is a different proportion than, let's say, a retail store. A third reason would be for manufacturing, where you integrate one company's product into another. So, for instance, and that comes in two categories: components and ingredients. Let's talk about ingredients first. If I'm, let's say Duncan Hines, the manufacturer of cake mixes, they will. What are the ingredients in the cake mix? Well, it's sugar, flour, cocoa powder, baking soda, that sort of thing. And if I buy the cake mix, and I decide, I have a chocolate cake mix, but I don't want chocolate. I take out the chocolate. I can't take out the chocolate. I mean, maybe if I do it in a chemistry lab, but so those are really ingredients. Whereas other products like a computer will have components, and you can actually sometimes swap out the components. Some easier than others. But people who can, and there are people who build their own computers, and those they choose the components they want. And for the most part, the manufacturers of components and ingredients by the consumer, the general consumer, are completely unknown, because these companies are their customers are the manufacturers. There are exceptions, of course. Intel very successfully marketed their chips to consumers. Not that the consumers bought the chips directly, but they chose computers that had Intel chips, and that drove the demand for their chips. I'm looking down at my computer and I see, Intel inside on a little sticker here. So, that was kind of very clever marketing what they did. But for the most part, most people won't know who the manufacturer of ingredients and components are. I said that we previously that we are adopting the marketing orientation. Sometimes it's called the marketing concept, orientation concept. It doesn't really matter. And as a part of that, we need to listen. We need to do research. And that means you need to define the research objectives. What is it that you're trying to understand? Then once you figure out what your question is, then you have to develop a research plan. And there are various methods. You can do surveys, interviews, focus groups. I'm not a big fan of focus groups because of group interactions. They kind of can skew opinions of individuals within the focus groups, but they are useful. Observation, you can simply observe how do people use products? How do they buy them? That sort of thing. And you can do experiments. A great experiment is maybe do a trial market. For instance, McDonald's years ago did, they test new products all the time. And I remember one they famously tested in Houston was the breakfast McGriddle sandwiches. And so they tested it, marketed it in Houston. It was a huge success. So then they did it across there in all the McDonald's, at least in the U.S. I don't know beyond the U.S. where that went, but the point is you can experiment. You can do insertion tests for test your advertising. You can, and you can again do the surveys and the interviews where you ask people. And what you would do, which method you'd use, depend upon what questions you're trying to answer. And then you collect the data. You do the survey, conduct the experiment, and so forth and so on. And then you have to analyze that data. And this is where statistical understanding, knowledge of statistics comes in very handy. And I would encourage you to take a statistics course. And then you have to make a decision. Ultimately, you're asking a question because you need to make a decision. Now, the decision might be to not do anything, to leave things as they are. That's a legitimate decision. Or it might be to do something. And going back to your research objectives, you really need to get those right. Otherwise, you're wasting your time with the rest of it. It might be like, if we offer our product in a new flavor, will people buy it? How many people will buy it? What the response would be. Again, it might be something else. And asking the right question is extraordinarily important. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, a company was launching a new dog food. They tested their advertising to see how people would respond to it. They tested the packaging. Okay. They launched their new dog food. It sold. Initial sales were extraordinary. It spiked and then it went down, and they didn't understand why. They retested their packaging, retested their advertising. People still responded well to it. So sometimes you have to bring in a new set of eyes. So they brought in a new consultant, a research consultant, and they said, "This is what we have. This is what's going on. This is the sales." And he says, "Okay, let me take all this and think about it." Comes back a few days later, says, "I know exactly what your problem is. I brought some, I got some samples of your dog food, and I tried to feed it to my dog. They don't like the taste of the dog food. The owners responded to the advertising and to the packaging. For some reason, they never tested whether the dogs like it." Again, that's the difference between the consumer and the customer. The customer was the dog owner. The dog was the consumer. So you have to, they were asking the wrong questions. They never asked, would the dogs eat it? I can't imagine they would actually not test that. I don't know. We talked about markets a moment ago. A market is a group of people who are buying your product or may buy your product, but not all consumers or customers are the same, and we can divide them up into different segments. And so, market segmentation is the dividing of a group into groups, dividing of a market into groups with distinct qualities who might require separate products or or different some change in the marketing mix, whether it's price or promotion or the product itself. We'll see. And there's various ways to divide a market, and there are 4 general segmentation methods, and you might even combine some of these methods. For instance, there's geographic segmentation. Where do people live? And where people live might indicate or might suggest what the products they would buy. For instance, somebody who lives in a warm area, like Florida, is more likely to buy a bathing suit. They're not going to probably buy, skis, snow skis. So, and that's kind of simple. Do they live in an urban area or a rural area or a suburban area? Are they local to you? Like a restaurant, obviously, is segmenting towards a local market. Demographically, and this is actually the most commonly used, this is things like how old people are, what gender, what sexual orientation, what religion, what profession, where they are in the life cycle. Are they married, single? Are they parents of young kids, old kids? Are they empty nesters? All sorts of easily identifiable information. That's why this is the most commonly used, because I can look at you and check some of those boxes off, probably. I can ask you simple questions and I can check the rest of those boxes off. And so that can be helpful. So that makes it very easy to use. And almost all segmentation has some usually demographic element to it. Psychographic is, what are people's attitudes? This is used very much in politics. What is your attitude about guns or abortion or something else? And the role of the federal government or whatever the issue is. There's a lot of segmentation done based on psychographics. And then behavioral. How do people behave? How do they purchase products? I'm not sure actually that's the same. That reference is still true with the current textbook, but when do they buy things? Is it are they use the product on a regular basis, or is it only for special occasions? How do they buy? How do they use? That sort of thing. Now there are various marketing approaches that one can take. There is mass marketing. Mass marketing really came into vogue in the 1950s and 1960s when television first arrived. For the first time, now you could reach millions of people with a single ad. They say television was, TV advertising was expensive, yes, to produce the ad and put it on the air. However, you reached a lot of people, so per consumer, it was actually relatively inexpensive. Print. It had farther reach than that. The trouble is, it was reaching everyone. When this first came out, there were only 3 networks. The advertising tended to be fairly generic. It was the era of what I call ER words. It was brighter, cleaner, stronger, that sort of thing. It was not nuanced very much at all. Then we have differentiated marketing, where we for those different market segments, we will approach them differently. We will target certain market segments as opposed to all the market segments. All the different types of users or consumers, and we'll focus on some, and we will alter our marketing mix for different groups. Maybe we'll pitch it one way for women, another way for men. Maybe we'll make a different product for adults and a different product for children. An example of that is like toothbrushes. A big toothbrush with a big bristles, that might be too big for a little kid. So you make a smaller toothbrush with a smaller, bristle head, which is too small for an adult. So different market segments, you create different products, you maybe advertise differently, that sort of thing. We can get even narrower into a niche marketing. Niche marketing is, again, niche is a small group. In this case, we're targeting people who may be overlooked by other competitors. They're a small group, but they might have an intense need. In fact, many products start out as niche products and then they expand outside the niche. So you might, these would be like specialty products. So yeah, that sort of thing. And then you have one-on-one marketing, like a tailor who custom makes, a bespoke suit, custom-made suit, or a dressmaker, or Rolls-Royce actually custom makes vehicles for you. It takes about 9 months. They make them by hand, and you can have exactly, the wood paneling. What kind of wood do you want? Do you want oak? Do you want cherry, mahogany, that sort of thing? What finish do you want? One great example of that would be John Lennon's Mercedes-Benz. It was white with red roses and green stems. It was just filled with red roses. That was a custom paint job, as they all are. So you can do that, and of course it takes time. It's and so a custom-made suit is expensive. So you're just creating a product for one person. And then more recently, we've been able to go into mass customization, where we make stuff exactly for one person, but we do it repeated on a mass scale. That has been enabled by technology, by computers, by databases, by the internet, things like digital printing, things like that. For example, I went to go buy a Dell laptop a number of years ago, and I went online, and I basically, through my choices, built my own laptop. It wasn't nothing extraordinary, but I got to choose the memory chip, the processor, the size of the hard drive. Now, they didn't have every permutation in their warehouse. What they did was they it's probably automated now, but they probably had somebody with a basket who went and picked all the different components I had indicated, put them in a basket, sent them down the assembly line, somebody just snapped them into place, and then they shipped the laptop to me. And they had other options. I want color panels on it, a wireless mouse, that sort of thing. And more products are being mass customized on a mass scale. For instance, I think with Nike sneakers, you can certain versions of it, you can customize it. What color you want it, what finish, colored laces. So you make all these choices, and then either a person or a computer or robots will assemble the product to your specifications. And you can do that with digital printing. I'm actually working on an autobiography, not to be published, but actually for my kids. When I pass away, I want there to be a book with all things they would ask about. When somebody dies, and maybe you've experienced this, they pass away, and then you regret not asking them certain questions, the things you want to know about their lives. So I'm doing this, and I'm just going to make 2 copies. That would be, and ordinarily that'd be enormously expensive, because it takes, the cost of printing in general is mostly in the setup. Once you start printing, the more copies you print, the more economical it becomes. So years ago, I'd never think of doing that. Now I can do it and print 2 copies. And so there's that. Okay, looking at consumer decisions. Consumer decision making. A lot of this you're going to go into much more depth when you take the marketing class. But we all do this. Consumers recognize that they have a problem. They may not think of it as a problem. Maybe it's an opportunity. There's something they want. It might be something as simple as thinking, I'm hungry. I have a need. You could also call this need recognition. And from there, they start to do an information search, like, what restaurants are available in this area? Where can I go to get some food? Um, and then there is an evaluation alternatives. Well, this restaurant here isn't so good. This one has good reviews. This one has the kind of food I like. This one it's rated well, but I don't particularly like that type of food. It's too spicy or too something else. So you evaluate the alternatives, and then you make a decision, and you buy that product, that food, or whatever it is. And then, of course, there's post-purchase behavior. Now, why would we even care about what people do after they buy and consume their product? Well, people often, one post-purchase behavior is that they come back for more. They become a repeat customer, and that's obviously very desirable. Another post-purchase behavior could be recommendations or a review. Could be a negative review. That is another post-purchase behavior. And actually, if people are dissatisfied, they are far more likely to tell others than if they're satisfied. If you have a bad experience, you usually tell people about it. I actually at the beginning of the pandemic, I bought a webcam online. And to be quite honest, it was crappy. It was just awful. I mean, the contrast, it was like black and white, no grays, nothing in between. I was like, my skin looked like, the white of a paper. It was like I had white mime makeup on, and it really looked really off. And I requested I wanted to return it, and I wanted a refund. And it's interesting, the manufacturer said, "Don't worry about returning it. We'll give you a refund. Just please don't give us a bad review online." Because that's a very negative post-purchase behavior. They didn't need my negative feedback, because I went online, looked at reviews later. Before I should have done it beforehand. They had a whole bunch of negative reviews, so that's tells you something. We talked about the marketing mix, the 4 Ps. First one being product, and as a company and maybe as an individual marketer, you'll have to make decisions about what products you offer, how will you offer them, what will the design be, what will the material that makes it be? Will it be made out of metal? Will it be made out of plastic, cardboard, whatever? You have to make that decision. And so, color, sizes, durability. Is it a durable product, or is it going to be a disposable product? These are decisions you have to make. What features or functions are you going to have on your product? That's important. And you'll find often in product lines there are different levels that some will have more features and some will have less features, and sometimes people want fewer features. There is something called feature bloat, where some products have too many features and consumers become confused. I experienced it with TV remotes. One day I was bored, and I decided to count the number of buttons on the TV remote, and there were 52 buttons, and there were a bunch of them I didn't know. I have no idea what they did. That's an example of feature bloat. And companies will do this because the more features, the more a salesperson can point to and say, oh, it does this, it does that, it does this other thing. They've actually found that the more of features a product has, the less likely you're going to get repeat business. So they have to find a happy medium. The brand name is another important thing. Selecting a brand name. Your brand name, your product's name, is going to go on the product, on the packaging, on signage at trade shows, on exterior packaging, on maybe on letterhead, business cards, any advertising. So you want to pick a good one. And actually, I had an experience. I was dealing with a company that I was helping them market a new product, And we were using I thought that there was, I forget the name of it, but I thought this was the name of the product. So no, this is just a placeholder. We're going to actually come up with a new brand name. And I said, well, and I had done a little work on creating brand names when I was at Merck. Um, so I said, well, would you mind if I gave it a crack? I said, well, you can, but we've actually hired a company to come up with brand names. I said, well, if I came up with a better one, would you consider it? He said, absolutely. Okay. So I came up with a bunch of them. There was three I was pretty confident were good, and one in particular I liked. This other company that specializes in this came up with 10 really great brand names. And only my top one actually can compete with that. And I said, wow, okay, they're really good. And they even explained the roots, and this has a Greek root and this has a Latin root and what it means. And the thing is, you want to be careful, because to change your brand name is a pain. The reason he was able to change it was they hadn't launched the product yet. Once you launch the product, you do, and you have to live with that name, and you check who has similar names. You also want to check things like, how does your product's name translate in another language? Is that important? Like the Chevy Nova, was a brand. Now they've stopped using that product name. Nova means in Spanish doesn't go. But once a car that's the name says it doesn't go. Another problem was Coca-Cola in a certain dialect of Chinese translates to bite the wax tadpole. I know that seems bizarre, but that was the phonetics. So they adjusted the phonetics, Coca-Cola or something like that, which they now translate to happiness in the mouth, which is a much better product name than bite the wax tadpole. But you want to think about these, or their connotations. For instance, somebody came out with a toothpaste called Q, CUE, I believe. And turns out in France, there's a pornographic magazine called Q. So, you don't necessarily want that connotation. Packaging is another important decision. What's it going to look like on the shelf? Does it need protection? What's the utility that it has? For instance, a bottle. If you're doing like fabric softener or detergent, does it have a no drip collar around it to prevent like if you pour something, and sometimes that the viscous liquid sort of drips down the bottom, and then you got to wipe it off. So there's actually packaging designers can make a lot of money if you are still trying to figure out your career. Package design might be an interesting one, because packages are always being redesigned. Do that. Also, what services are you going to offer? Now, maybe your product is the service. There's goods, and then there's services. Both are products. But if you're offering a product, does it come with certain services like technical support or a guarantee or, installation or delivery or something like that? For instance, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, they don't have cars that are any better than anyone else's. How do they distinguish themselves? They deliver the car to you. Or they pick you up. I'm sorry, they don't deliver the car. They pick you up, bring you to them, you get the car, and then you drive away. And that's how they distinguish themselves. That's a service that's part of the product. Remember I said we want to deliver superior value. So you need to differentiate yourself from your competitors. There's product differentiation, where you have superior features or benefits or some unique offering. If you can do that, that's great. That's sometimes difficult to do because there are competitors. Well, are there other ways to differentiate yourself? Sure, through service differentiation. Superior service, support. I had an IT guy who worked, since I don't work in the corporate world anymore, I had to hire my own IT guy, on a part-time basis to help me with my computer issues. And he put an antivirus program on my computer, and he said, basically, it's the equivalent of the Microsoft product. I can't say it's any better, but what I like about it is that if I have a problem, I can call up the company and they can talk me through it. Where Microsoft always refers you to a website, and he said it's much easier to deal with these other people. They have better service. The product isn't better, but the service is better. So yeah. Channel differentiation, how it's convenience of obtaining the product. I just mentioned a great example of that with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They bring you, they pick you up, and that makes it very convenient. Certainly, when the internet was first introduced, companies differentiated themselves by offering their products online. That's essentially how Amazon, Amazon doesn't offer superior products. They offer the convenience of buying a product online. Now, of course, everyone buys online, so it's not that much of a differentiation. But actually, some people are trying to differentiate themselves with different ways, like selling in places they wouldn't necessarily expect on a personal basis. And there's also image differentiation. Every product has an image, a personality, and how can you make it different? Think about, for instance, Coke and Pepsi. They're almost identical products. Yeah, there's a slight taste change, but not that different. They're both essentially brown sugar water, carbonated brown sugar water. But they have different personalities. Pepsi is always very modern. It's always current. They're using the most the current spokespeople. Whether it's Beyonce or Britney Spears. I don't know who they're using these days, but Coca-Cola is traditional. It's family. It's comfortable. Ironically, Pepsi is an older company than Coca-Cola, but that's the image they've created. Think about the image that Apple has, or Nike has, or McDonald's have. It has a certain image. Sometimes it's hard to even define in words, but you have a feeling about these products, and that's not by an accident. That's intentional, at least if they're successful. So now we have, if you're creating a new product, there are various developmental stages. First is idea generation. Where do ideas for new products come from? Well, a lot of it comes from brainstorming. Sometimes it comes from market research. Sometimes it is serendipity, but you have to be able to listen to those, when those serendipitous things occur. A perfect example of serendipity, 3M, which makes adhesives, 3M Scotch tape, that sort of thing. They make adhesives, and they made a batch of glue that went wrong. Something happened to it. It was sticky, but it wasn't very sticky. It was just marginally sticky, It wasn't like a real glue or a tape or that sort of thing. And then discussing about, well, how do they dispose of this bad glue? And then a secretary said, could I have some? So why do you want it? And what she did is she would take little pieces of paper and just stick it on a little on the end and just sort of put it on a wall or place just to hold it in place. She inadvertently invented the Post-it note. Now Post-it notes, you take a Post-it note, it's not that sticky, but it's sticky enough that I could put a piece of paper on something. So ideas for new products come from all different places. You have to be open to those possibilities. A lot will come from market research, constantly asking what do you need? I think Palmolive did this years ago, the dishwashing soap detergent, and they kept on pushing, people who did a lot of dishes, how could we improve our product? And somebody finally said, when I'm washing Tupperware or Rubbermaid or whatever it is, plastic dishware, and I've had tomato sauce in it, I can't get out that orangish stain. And they said, aha, and they developed a detergent that would get that orange tomato sauce stain out. And so, asking questions, keeping your eyes open is a way, and brainstorming are ways to generate ideas for new products. Um, and it's interesting. Sometimes, if you're in a brainstorming session, the key to a good brainstorming session is to encourage bad ideas, stupid ideas, ridiculous ideas, because sometimes they will turn out to be maybe not a great idea themselves, but they'll trigger somebody else or another idea that's good. I remember I was in one brainstorming session and I was tired. I just decided to make a joke, something silly I threw out there. And somebody said, "Oh, wait a minute, that's an idea." Oh, yeah, yeah, we could. I was kidding, and it turned out to be an idea that we ended up going with. Um, and even if it's any, what you can't have in a brainstorming session is somebody saying, "Oh, no, that's a terrible idea," because then people pull back and they don't. If they're going to be criticized, they're not going to give you their bad ideas or their silly ideas or other ideas. So you really have to be very careful there. So encourage stupid ideas, and usually something interesting comes out. But however, eventually you can't use all those ideas, and some of them really are unusable. So you have to do idea screening. You have to sort of go through it and say, okay, this could work, that could work, that's definitely not going to work, and save the best thing for there. Then you have to do sort of a product, business, and marketing strategy analysis. You have to say, okay, what market segment would this product work for? How do we need to present it? What is it going to cost us to produce? What is it going to cost us to market? This is where you get financial analysis involved, as well as other things. And then you have to do some product development, and this might mean prototyping. Developing. Let's say I want to come up with a new cup. So we make one, and there are different types of prototypes. There are looks like prototypes, and then there are works like prototypes. Like somebody developed a new type. If you want to develop a new type of fire extinguisher, yeah, you could do a looks like prototype, but then eventually you have to do a works like, a test of concept kind of thing. And you do have to test this. Will this work? And like somebody came up with the McGriddle sandwich at McDonald's. I can imagine there was an idea generation session, brainstorming, and somebody said, "Oh, let's take something like a pancake and put a sausage on it, an egg on it, and then something else like a cross between a pancake and a waffle," and they probably played around with that a lot. They developed it, and then they tested, and I said they tested it in Houston, and it was successful. They also tested the McLobster sandwich in Massachusetts, and that didn't work so well. So sometimes things that one reason you test is to prevent from launching bad products as well. And then full commercialization. You're gonna mass produce it. You're gonna market it. You're gonna distribute it. Get it out there. So those are sort of roughly the stages of new product development. And if you get involved with that, it's kind of a fun thing to do. So, excuse me. And every product has a life cycle. Nothing is forever. And like human beings and other animals, we have various stages. There is product development or gestation. Then there is introduction or birth, growth. We all grow, and then there's maturity, and then there is decline at the end. So, and this is the sales line. And this is not necessarily proportional because the lifespan of different products is going to be very different. So here is the date of launch. You launch it, and then eventually, if it catches on, it grows, and then it matures. Matures at peak. It means it peaks. And the maturity stage can be quite elastic. You might have products that are fads. My favorite fad is the Pet Rock from 1973. It was launched in October, and by February nobody wanted one. It was a gimmicky kind of thing. It was literally a rock that they put in the box with holes in it so the rock could breathe. It was a silly kind of thing, and it had a very short life cycle. On the other end, you look at something like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was a mature, it was a growing product for a long time, a mature product. I'm not sure, it may be starting to decline because people are, want to be healthier. So there's that. And of course, profit and loss falls. And if you look here, you start losing money as you're developing the product because you're spending money on the product development, but there's no revenue coming in. And even upon launch here, you see this dotted line represents launch, you're still going to lose more money because you have to advertise, the promotion, that sort of thing. But eventually you will come up and you will start to make money. And eventually, of course, since the sales decline, the profit will decline. Decline doesn't necessarily mean death. There are a lot of products that decline. You can manage a product, it's called milking the brand, for a long time. So anyway, price, again, another P. You have list price. That's what's on the sticker, but not everyone pays list price. There are all sorts of discounts, and discounts make something seem more valuable. It's like they're getting a deal. We always want products for less price. So we also have rebates, kind of like a discount, except we give it afterwards. Seems more valuable. It seems like we're getting something extra, even though the math might be exactly the same. Credit terms are important. The time value of money, if you've taken a course in economics, you might be familiar with that. A dollar today is worth more than a dollar next month. Because of inflation, if you get the dollar today, you can do something with it. You can pay off bills, you can invest it, you can do stuff with it. But sometimes you can induce people to buy by giving credit terms. You say, okay, you don't have to pay us for 30 days or for 60 days or 6 months. I remember my wife and I were trying to buy a sofa, and we were stuck between two sofas, which we like better, two different stores, and we went to a Sears outlet store, one of them, and they said, well, we have no money down for 6 months. Essentially, they say you don't have to pay us for 6 months. Then 6 months you have to pay us, and if you don't pay us in 6 months, well, after we just that tipped the balance, and so we bought that one, and then the guy said, make sure you pay before 6 months, but otherwise the company's going to charge you interest. So we paid it off in 4 months. Also, credit terms are very useful for retailers. Let's say I want to start a store. I need to fill it with product. That's going to cost a lot of money. But what I could do is, usually there's something called trade credit. It's either 30 days or 60 days. They'll give me the product and I can start selling it now, and I don't have to pay them for 30 or 60 days. And then after that, I have to pay them, obviously. But that helps with cash flow. I don't have to pay as much initially. So anyway, then there's something called bundling, and this is where you put together products that are normally sold separately, and you build in a discount. Think of the McDonald's value meal. You go through the drive-through, and you always say, yes, I'll have the chicken sandwich. And they say, oh, do you want the sandwich or the meal? And what they're doing is they're bundling it. And so let's say, these are not the prices, but let's say the sandwich costs $3, the drink costs $2, and the French fries cost $1. And you're not going to get the French fries, but they say, well, if you get the bundle, the French fries will only cost 50 cents. It's a deal. So that might encourage you to buy. One thing that is illegal, however, is to force bundles, to say you can't buy, this product that's normally available separately unless you buy our bundle. And I encountered that when I was buying a video camera years ago. And I found I knew the video camera I wanted. I researched it, and I found the lowest price. And I called them up and said, I'd like to buy this camera. And they said, which bundle? I said, they explained to me what was in the bundle. I said, what's in the bundles? And it was like, crappy tripod, lens tissue, filters, stuff I already had. I said, no, I just want the camera. Well, we don't sell it that way. I said, well, you do. It's listed on your website. And I said, well, the website's wrong. And they said, no, sorry. And they hung up on me. And I researched them and found out that this is a company that sort of sets itself up sells, and when somebody calls the attorney general about what they're doing, they just dissolve, and then in the next state they set up again, which is unfortunate. So another thing about price is the relationship. Well, first off, to calculate your revenue, it's the price you're charging times the quantity of units you've sold. So for instance, if I'm selling a product for $5 per unit and I sell 10 units, my revenue is $50. Fairly straightforward. Think of it as a rectangle. Anyway, every product has a demand curve. And you may not know about the demand curve, but you understand the concept behind it. For instance, if I offer you, let's say this is your favorite beverage. I don't have a bottle here, but a bottle of your favorite beverage. And I say it's available for $5. It's your favorite beverage. So it's a product you like. But you say, $5. Again, remember that transaction thing. You don't value it at $5. So but maybe some of you might. I drop it to $4. A couple more of you might say, yeah, I'll buy it for $4. $3. If I get down to $2 and it's your favorite beverage, chances are you're going to buy it. And if you buy it for $5, you're certainly going to buy it for $2. So I may offer it at a higher price, but fewer people will buy it. I drop the price really low. A lot of people will buy it, but I'm not going to make as much per unit. So I usually find something in between, and you can determine the demand curve through it's a kind of a difficult statistical formula. It's called regression analysis. I won't make you to do it, but in this course, but you can actually, I think, do it in an Excel spreadsheet now. I actually had to learn how to do it manually, the formulas and all, and now you can do it in an Excel spreadsheet. But you have to have the data. You have to raise the price up and down and see how that affects demand. So you want to find that sweet spot where you get the maximum revenue, the equivalent geometrically of a square, where with the same perimeter, a square gives you the maximum area. Unfortunately, we can't do it geometrically because one unit is price and the other unit is quantity. So we can't do it geometrically, but you could calculate it if you have a demand curve. And what we always try to do is actually through our marketing is try to move that demand curve out to increase demand. Now, if demand suddenly spikes, we have choices. We could sell more product at the same price, or sell the same amount of product at a higher price. Great. But and obviously, maybe not obviously, but it'd be better to sell the same amount at the higher price because your cost would be the same. You're producing the same number of units and you're getting more for it. However, maybe because if the product is perishable, you may choose to go the other way, to sell it at the same price. In some cases, you have to can only sell the same amount. Let's say if you are a impresario and you've booked a musical act, and you've rented a venue or an arena or an auditorium, and let's say for next June, and in the meantime, that the musical act has a hit record, a hit song, they become popular. And it's all right, you've got them in a contract, so they're still going to honor the contract, but now the demand has gone up, but you only have so many seats at the arena. So you can charge more per seat. And that's what actually scalping, even though it's an illegal activity, that's what it's based on, that the value of the seats go up. So, of course, you can also split something down the middle as well. Then we have something called a break-even analysis. I mean, you have to be able to break even. And what do we mean by that? I mean, you're selling at one price, but it costs you to make the product. So you have to figure a price where at the very least you'll break even. Now, you have to look at two types of costs, however. There are fixed costs, Costs that have nothing to do with how much you produce. If I produce 1 or I produce 1,000,000, my fixed costs are the same. These are things like the rent on your factory, maybe utilities. If you pay a security guard or a receptionist, you know, they have nothing to do with production. So there's your fixed costs, and you have to pay it every month or every quarter, whatever your financial period is. And on top of that, we have what are called variable costs. We're laying that on top of the fixed costs, and these are related to production. So let's say I'm in the shoe business. I'm manufacturing shoes, and it's the cost of the leather, the soles, the laces, the labor to manufacture these shoes. And as I make more, I move to the right, and it costs more. So that's fairly straightforward, I think. Then we also have the revenue. We sell at a certain price, but there's no such thing as fixed revenue. So all our revenue is variable. And as we sell more, we make more revenue. Sell more units, we make more revenue. And essentially, we have to make sure that before the end of the period in which we have to pay our fixed costs, whether it's a month or a quarter or whatever, we have to hit that break-even point. And anything after that is profit. So obviously, you want to sell more doing that. Okay. And if you're interested, there is don't need that. There is a formula. Not if you're interested. There's a formula, and it's fixed costs divided by unit price minus variable cost, and that equals the break-even volume. It's not a number figure, or not a dollar figure we're looking for. It's a number of units. How many units do we need to sell to break even? So let's drop in some numbers here. 500. Let's say my fixed costs per month is $500,000. Okay. I've decided to price my product at $12 a unit, but it costs me $8 a unit variable cost to manufacture. So 12 minus 8 is 4. 500,000 divided by 4 equals 250,000 units. Okay. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but that's what I need to sell to break even. Well, maybe I'm not comfortable with that. So maybe what I can do is I've got to do something. What can I adjust? Well, the easiest thing to adjust is the price. So let me just raise the price of my product just $1 and just see what happens. To $13. Well, 500,000 divided by the difference between $13 and $8, that's $5. So 500,000 divided by $5 equals 100,000 units. Okay, that's better. Well, let me see what happens. Maybe I can do that more, and I'll make it $16. So now it's 500,000 divided by $8, the difference between the unit price and the variable cost. And that calculates out to 62,500 units. That's much better. Why not just keep going? Well, the problem is, of course, we bump up against that pesky demand curve. If we raise our price too much, we are going to essentially be price ourselves out. We're not going to be able to sell very many units. So you have to, when you do this break-even analysis, you also have to look at what the demand is going to be for that at that price level. All right, I think I'm going to stop here. Well, I'll pick up with another unit that will start. The next unit we'll talk about distribution. So, all right, take care, and see you whenever.